Okay, so welcome everybody. Nice to see a nice group here today. I'm Tara Mahoney. I'm the Research and Engagement Manager at SFU's Community Engaged Research Initiative. And we're really excited to have Kristen Gosling with us today, the Director of Participatory Research at Penn State Center in Philadelphia. And yeah, I think what's going to be a really insightful and exciting conversation with her coming up. But before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm a fourth generation Irish settler, zooming in from the unceded and ancestral territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. And given that the majority of higher education institutions in Canada are on the unceded territories of Indigenous people, and inequities from colonization are ongoing in Canadian society, we at SFU CERI see community engaged research as an actionable strategy for change that makes visible Indigenous ways of knowing that have traditionally been excluded across research institutions and hold up the critical role that Indigenous knowledge plays in remembering our past and imagining and building a climate just future. And to that end, I wanted to just mention a project that we've been developing for quite a few months now called the Indigenous Centered Knowledge Exchange. And so this project builds off our research shop model where we partner um, uh, SFU grad students with community organizations to provide research services at low or no cost. So we've developed this model into this knowledge exchange that serves exclusively Indigenous communities and their research needs. So if you work with any Indigenous communities that are in need of research services, please keep us in mind and reach out. And we'd love to chat more about how to get involved with that program. And so to introduce our guests, I was just debating on whether or not I wanted to read out your bio, Kristen, or if I just wanted to invite you to, it's always kind of like, I don't know, odd when someone reads out a long and impressive bio, when I can just ask you to maybe introduce yourself in the way that feels right for you today, and we can go from there.
Thank you, Tara, and thank you, everybody, for joining us and for this invitation to be with you and to be in conversation today. Yeah, my name's Kristen, and I am located in Lenape lands, otherwise known as Philadelphia, on the east coast of, I guess we're still called the United States of America. And it's 101 degrees Fahrenheit here today. We've broken a new record for heat in June, as of this week. And today, these are all the things I'm coming in with. I um, am the director of participatory research at the Philly Center, as Tara indicated, and that is one of Penn State's urban centers. So we have two, one in Philadelphia on the east side of Pennsylvania and one in Pittsburgh on the west side of Pennsylvania. And Pennsylvania is a huge state. It takes about 7 hours to drive across the state. Um, and my job theoretically is to kind of champion and lead and co-lead and support and resource participatory research for community-driven aims and intentions. How I got here is a long story. I'm from the rural Midwestern United States, and I moved to the West Coast as soon as I could. And I moved to California, where I did AmeriCorps, and then I worked in a residential facility. My background is in social services, and I am a child and family therapist, which I got that degree in Portland, Oregon. And then I moved to Vancouver, BC, which is where I met Amanda and how I got connected with you, with this crew and network at University of British Columbia. And my PhD is in human development, learning, and culture. And I would say that all of these kind of little snippets of my journey are kind of key to where I am today, both in kind of this lifelong kind of pursuit and intention to create change and to co-create and collaborate and transform systems and institutions um, to best serve the people who are experiencing them and who live in them and who within them and who are the experts on them. And um, and I would say that, like, from my kind of social services and clinical background, relationships have always been centered. Um, it's 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 reflected in my kind of epistemological and ontological commitments. I'm a sociocultural scholar, and relationships are how we come to be and to know and to kind of evolve and our humanness. And I use art and creativity for all of those things, for relationship building, for individual and social transformation, for um, meaning making. And I think from going from beginning as a youth scholar and a very youth oriented person, I have kind of evolved into a more, my research has expanded to more intergenerational um, collaborations. And I think that might be kind of related to participatory action research and like how it actually is effective and what is needed in order to create systemic and structural change is solidarity and coalitions. Um, so that was a long ramble, and I'm going to stop talking now and know that whatever pick up or take us somewhere else.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I think that gives us a good sense of where you've been and where you're at the current moment. Um, One thing I forgot to mention in my opening comments was this gathering is part of a series we've been doing, a collaboration series been doing with the Walk With Me project, which is a project out of Vancouver Island University, community engaged research project focused on the impacts of the drug poisoning crisis in small communities in British Columbia, particularly on Vancouver Island. And one thing that we talked about throughout our collaborative time together was this need to kind of like exchange ideas and just bring communities of solidarity together across institutions and not have like too strong of an agenda, but just know that we're in a moment of deep change and transformation and difficulty, and to just sort of be in that moment together and figure out how to move forward in creative ways together. And yeah, I'm excited for this conversation because I think that's getting at the heart of that and the sort of like the role of the institution in that, which is a very interesting question. And as part of the Critical Imagination Network, Amanda Wagner has been on that organizing committee, who I'm going to invite in at points to just ask some questions as kind of like a co-facilitator here. So Amanda, feel free to jump in at any point. Um, and and maybe when you do, just a quick intro of yourself as well. But I think maybe to kick us off, to just kind of get us going, I've been particularly interested in this idea of the role of universities and public universities, especially in the time of the poly crisis, when we're seeing these overlapping and intersecting crises happening in our society, like the affordability crisis on top of the climate crisis, on top of the drug poisoning crisis, on top of the peace or war crisis, however you want to think about that, and it's just getting more intense as time goes on. And so in this context, what do you see as the role or responsibilities of universities, and are they rising to the occasion? If not, how could they be? How should they be? So I'm curious about your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Um, Thanks for that question. And really, what I also am is really present of mind, and something I'm really grateful to be in this space with all of you around. And so, I'm gonna probably try to resituate myself throughout the conversation, and just knowing that we are neighbors. Well, actually, could I get a show of hands of, um or like in the chat, maybe even where people are situated? um and because part of what I'm absolutely kind of experiencing is this really intense, immediate, violent dismantling of education, on top of all of these other crises, as Tara mentioned, right? As soon as 47 took office, the Department of Education, which is our federal branch that governs education from K to grad school, right? So kindergarten through university, um, which is now being led by the former head of the or World Wrestling Federation. Um, it just it wasn't even a snowball, right? It was just a literal, like, explosion, by design. And what I experienced then, kind of right away in January, was a really similar kind of resonance of the pandemic. And from a kind of collective trauma lens, it really recalled that same sort of response. And, like, as within the soma, within my individual human body, and within institutions and the collective. And so, thank you all. I'm looking and checking the chat too. And I was also always watching very closely what was happening north of the border, and Trudeau, and now Carney, and why aren't, the annexing conversation, right? Like, all of these acts of violence are interconnected. And so, um taking a breath to slow myself down, because that is also how it moves. It's so much, so fast, and you can't keep up. And so what happened, similar to the pandemic, was what I experienced and observed from our universities and our leaders, people in true positions of power, like presidents, provosts, um, was silence. And let's let's keep going and see if we can kind of really fly under the radar and avoid what's happening over there, right? Like, so Colombia got held up as, like, don't become Colombia. Um, and it was really, really awful, for lack of a better word. Morale kind of took that same immediate, just kind of plummet. And let's not, like, delude ourselves into thinking that before we were in some amazing position of, like, success and resilience and like resource and abundance. We were already institutions of higher education in the US and universities are already operating at a deficit, at a kind of scarcity mindset, at a um, really within a climate of anti education, anti knowledge, anti teacher, anti educator discourse. And so I say all of this because I also believe so deeply in education. I obviously, I mean, to pursue a PhD, like to get a PhD, you have to at least like school of some in some way. I have to feel, and I deeply believe in the ideal of education and in the kind of ideal of education as an, potential social equalizer. Never has been achieved. It has really been used to reinforce and reproduce social disparities and power and equity, right? But I believe in and I love the institution of education, and because of that, I think I want it to be better. I want our leaders to have moral courage. I want them to have integrity and uh like have people's backs, have our students backs, have our international students backs, both behind closed doors and in front of closed doors. I want statements to be made about ice don't come on my campus. I want i want i want our leaders to be unflinching in their defense of all of the things I hold dear, right? Like intellectual freedom, of the idea of democratic participation, of fair equity and justice, all of these things that are in strategic plans, that are in promotional materials, that are on websites and sound bites. I want them to be felt and reinforced and lived by our leaders. And I'm not seeing that. The president of Wesleyan was one of the first presidents to make an explicit, very public statement against Trump. Um, I think it was like on TV, and then he also wrote, an op-ed in one of our national papers. And since that time, Harvard has pushed back, and that is a convoluted tale as to how they got to the point of pushing back as well. And they're also having conversations now about what happens if they compromise, because they are in negotiations, right? So I feel like this is the moment that our universities and the education system, this is the moment for them to kind of show their role and the polity, to kind of demonstrate the ideals. Um, so yeah, that's a long way of saying, like, I'm super disappointed.
Hmm. And just to follow up on that, like, what do you think that looks like? Like, if you're sitting, I think a lot of people on this call are working at universities, teaching at universities. Like, if you're at a university, is that like, I mean, I guess it would look different for everyone depending on where you're at, but is it pressuring the people who are in power, like the presidents and the provosts? Is it community organizing with people who hold, relatively safe or protected academic positions? Is it engaging student? Like, what are the things that could put pressure on the leadership so that they start to reflect some of these things in a more courageous way? Like I genuinely, like, I have some ideas on how you could do that, but I'm wondering, like, are there examples you've seen where that's good examples of how we can either organize or think about how we might move given where we're positioned toward this sort of vision that you're describing?
Yeah. So one example that is I find particularly hopeful was a group of universities. It started with a faculty at Rutgers in New Jersey and maybe Delaware. I'm forgetting the other institution that the other professor was at, but they got together, and I am like, one was a chemist and one is in biology, right? So it's not like they're political scientists or they're like doing organizing work, right? They were just like, this is ridiculous. Why aren't our public universities, or like universities in general, coming together in solidarity and creating a block? Um, and and that's what they did. But so what they did is they did that as faculty senates. So there is a growing list of a coalition of universities, faculty senates who have signed on in coalition, who are committed to, if there's a lawsuit, all of our resources will go to support whatever, whoever's experiencing the lawsuit, right? It's like a literal kind of commitment to solidarity, a coalition, right? Um, and that's faculty senates. And to me, that is faculty using the one kind of mode of governance that they have, that is recognized by across institutions, and showing our leaders, so if we're talking about provosts and presidents, what they would like to see by doing it, right? um, and I think that's also how we win. You can't kill 300 universities at the same time. And if that's what, like, if you make yourself too big to fail, like the banks, for for lack of a better metaphor. um and so, like, that is one thing, one example. One thing that I did within Penn State was offer a virtual space for people to come and be in community with each other, because what we're experiencing, and I know I'm not alone at my institution, like this isn't just Penn State, but like, we are going through an authoritarian dictator takeover. And so the baseline in the States is fear. It is a culture of fear, which is, maintained through silence and kind of dearth, like, of information. So people just aren't talking. Deans aren't saying anything. Department chairs aren't saying anything. We don't know, like, nothing's happening. So business as usual. The mantra is business as usual when everything is but usual. And so I was like, well, how about we create a space where people can actually come and talk about their fears, talk about what they're hearing, what they're seeing. Because when you don't have information, then that, can really dovetail into, our imaginations are, well, in this moment, I can't say that. Our imaginations aren't worse than reality, unfortunately. But often we can create a story, a fictional story, that is way worse than what actually is. Um, so combating it with that, building solidarity, connecting across. Penn State is also a massive behemoth institution. So people will work in the same building and never meet. Um, People in different departments within the same faculty will never meet. So it's like also trying to address some of that siloing and building relationship, because, Joe in chemistry might have gotten some information from somebody that, somebody in education didn't. So just trying to create informal networks of information sharing, like organizing. It was a start to organizing. I do not have the capacity to organize my university, so that was never my intent. Um, there are lawsuits happening. So Penn State is part of the Association of Public Land Grant Universities that has a lawsuit against the federal government. So that is the way that I think most of our formal leaders are fighting is litigiously. And I don't have enough of an inside strategy to know what their inside strategy is. That is just the truth of it from an organizing perspective. What I would want to see is, our grad students really kind of came together. There are a lot, as is I think very common, our students really showing the way for how to organize and what to do. What I would like to see is a blanket like refusal of allowing ICE anywhere near any university, like at all, like much less just my own university. Um, there's many more things, but I don't know. Go ahead. Sorry, I think I lost my thread.
No, I think that you answered so many of the questions actually, and then the following questions as well. Um, so thank you, Kristen. Uh,
Sorry.
Kristen, as she said, she's an old friend. We went to UBC together. My name is Amanda Wager. I'm director of the art research community at Vancouver Island University. Um, and I'm really excited to ask you some more questions.
Great.
Yay!
Anybody else can also, chime in and answer.
Yes. Yeah. Um, so this question connects that one, and it said, what does it mean to do research in service of social movements? And how do you avoid the extractive tendencies of the academic research model?
Well, I know you got that from my website, so I guess I have to speak to it. So part of that kind of tagline or explicit just statement is about doing research in service of social movements is about making it explicit and orienting ourselves toward accountability and intention, like from the outset, right? So I think a few things. For I moved to Philadelphia in 2015, so straight out of graduate school I moved here, and I had never really been here before. And so I was seeking community, and where that grew for me was within the education justice movement. And so within that community and within that movement space is where I built kind of one of my primary inquiry and longitudinal critical participatory action research project um, within that community. And so in being in a community for almost 10 years now and doing research with the same folks over 10 years, I have learned and grown in ways I had never really anticipated through research, right? So my orientation was always toward participatory action research from the very first study I did as a master's student. I did a photo voice project, and so I knew that was really the only way that I could feel within integrity to my values and beliefs as a researcher. And part of that is that commitment to democratic participation, to democratizing knowledge production, and to shifting power, right? Like an ongoing attention and efforting and labor to negotiate power within the research relationships to, you know, create and produce knowledge that was in service to community driven aims. My community just happens to be movement leaders and community organizers. So within the harm reduction, I work with, you know, around young people experiencing the opioid and overdose crisis. That was within a harm reduction coalition. It's always, that is where kind of my, I mean, that's just where I want to be. And so, and who I want to be in relationship with, because of our shared, like, at the outset, I know that my values are aligned and we share a desire for collective liberation. And so research then becomes one tool, one of many tools that I kind of have a skill set and some resources around that I can leverage to those aims. And so that is how I have evolved my kind of roles and my positions and kind of positionality within movements and within the university, which is how can I leverage my resources, the institutional power and resources to community driven aims and kind of vision. And how, I think you asked about like, how do I avoid transactional? I mean,
The extractive tendencies of the academic research model. Yeah.
not perfect. I mean, like, it's really hard in that what is hard about it is that in order for me to have my position at a university, I am held accountable for the metrics and like productivity that is legible and recognized by the university, that really doesn't have a whole lot of relevance or meaning to the communities that I'm organizing and researching with, right? So what that means to me, and all, but it always has meant, is that I see it as like multiple consecutive projects. So like my publication, for example, everybody's invited to who wants to write a journal article. Some of my co-researchers absolutely do, and some of them don't, right? And like, it's an open invitation, and then it's also like, ultimately it's my responsibility to meet my tenure clock. That's on me. And sometimes it's harder than others, and it's probably why I got tenure and then I quit. So there's that.
Thank you. Yeah, so you've worked with youth organizers and community groups. What practices have you found that nurture solidarity and shared vision? And this also is about not only with those communities, but for yourself, like navigating burnout or disillusionment. So what do you do with community and what do you do to keep yourself going?
Oh, Amanda. I mean, you know, this is a place where what one of what the second part of that question was, like, what I wanted to bring to this conversation today is like, I am again recognizing and aware of the level of burnout that I'm experiencing, and my question around like what is possible within an institution. And part of what has shifted in that question for me is like, what is possible for my own liberation and freedom? Because if I believe in collective freedom, then mine is intertwined as well. And it cannot be like freedom uh, freedom and social justice cannot be at the cost of my own well-being, right? I have to be part of the vision that I am that I'm that I'm working toward, with the people I love. And so I that's part of the question literally that I'm bringing with to you all is like, is academia, is the academy, is the university conducive any longer? Are the resources and the power and the capacity that we've historically been able to glean and leverage toward and in pursuit of, are those actually there anymore? Um, so that's a pin for you all to tell me. And then the other question, Amanda, is like that place where I think really our writing group, with our colleagues, Dana and Marit, is a place that I think of often as an example of like, how do you build solidarity? How do you build relationships? And like, what are the tools and practices? Part of it is time. Part of it is literal time in relationship. Part of it is food. Part of it is like bringing your personal, whole, fallible self, making mistakes and repairing. Art. We happen to all really be committed to art and creative practices. So, and like music, play, shared experiences. It is always, and this takes me back to my, service provider days. It's like the best clinical sessions I had with young people was when we were in the car on our way to 7-Eleven, or like it was always never in an office, never in a formal setting. It's about the time between, which is also the agenda kind of thing that Tara started us off with. That was a finding I had in my dissertation that has been consistent through all of the research I've done, which is like less agenda. We need to come together and just, I mean, I'm of the belief that there's like the sweet spot, right? Like you got a little structure so that the innovation and creativity and connection can happen, but like every minute can't be planned. Um, and yeah, letting people see you and getting to know each other.
Do you have another one, or do you want me to jump in?
Um, I can keep going, and I resonate so much with Kristen. We do work closely together throughout the years, so much of what she's saying is so important, not just. And I also just came from an international drama and education conference at UBC where there was just so much artistic. There was community members,
Mm.
there were academics, and we did so much arts together. And Syria, I know, has held a conference also where there was that integration of so many ways to create community, even in a quick manner. So I appreciate the comment about bringing the arts in multiple different ways. Um, so this is more about going to the future and visioning new possibilities. So what would a truly liberatory research ecosystem look like to you? And what kinds of structures or relationships would it center?
What do you think?
Me?
Yeah.
Art, dancing,
Yes. Yes.
breathing, taking lots of moments to bring time, maybe like a beach,
Totally.
some
Totally.
sand to sit to stomp around in together. Um, no, to be that's more. I
No,
mean,
that's
those things are
totally.
important, yeah. But food, sharing warmth, sharing space, like yeah. Continue, please.
Well, it's funny. One of the first like so like I said, I've been working with the education justice movement is like my crew, right? And so we took a retreat during the summer after we were deep in analysis mode. And so I was like, okay, we're doing a bunch of analysis like this whole week. And one day in the middle of it, I was like, we're going to road trip to the beach because analysis is hard, right? Like you have to get lost in the data. And I was like, we also just need to like go and put our feet in the ocean and lay in the sun and eat popsicles. And that was part of the research retreat, like literally stomping around in the sand, Amanda, right? Like um listening to someone talk about what happened at school that day. Something really messed up happened at school. Um, what like I mean, I can't think about this like this vision without thinking about everything, right? It's like, well, everyone has food. Like everyone has a, you know, safe and healthy home and place to sleep. Like it's like all of those things are, you know, uh dialectically related to a research ideal is that we've got our basic needs met. I can't believe we're still saying like, well, basic needs are important. And once we have to meet all of those before we can do X, Y, and Z, right? Um, but I would say like if my vision of like the ideal of participatory action research was achieved, then you know the folks at the board of education meeting that I'm sitting next to would be like, hey, since we know how to do research, we're going to actually research this and like come up with an alternative plan. And Kristen, we just need you. Can you just like print these things off? Like it would be fully like power to the people. And I would be, you know, making copies or setting up. I'm always setting up the art table. I mean, that's just always going to be something that I'm doing. But yeah, it would be people owning their expertise and leadership and saying like this is the question I want to answer and this is how or like and these are the people I want to be in conversation with to decide how we're going to answer this question and what we're going to do with it and um yeah, confidence.
I'm just going to jump in. There's a comment here from Brenda Morrison in the chat saying, interesting that agenda and agency have the same root word, given agency is so important to being trauma informed and social change. Agendas these days are so linear. Can we have circular agendas? Um, Brenda, I love that comment. I wonder if you want to jump in and also I know the Walk With Me folks are on the call as well. And I know that having been in some of the spaces that you've convened has felt quite like the closest to a liberatory research ecosystem that I've ever been in. And so if you wanted to jump in to this question, also feel free. But Brenda, maybe I'll hand it to you for a minute if you're
Yeah,
comfortable.
I was thinking of that juxtaposition because I was just about to write a abstract on one of our latest art projects for a conference, and I really wanted to center agency. And then you said agenda, and I'm like, oh yeah, our agendas are so, our agendas are always getting co-opted by someone. Whose agenda are we working on? And then because I work in carceral systems, particularly prisons, all the time. Started in Graterford, in fact, but and we walked in. We just did one in a men's minimum security prison in BC, and they said, "So exactly what are you doing?" We don't know. It's emergent. It's going to be driven by them, not us. And they're like, "So you want us to prove something that you don't know what you're doing? Where's the agenda?" And I'm like, so there is this sort of tension there. I was just focusing on that. and curious, because agency and agendas, like I think so much gets co-opted these days. It has a different genesis and then people steal it. Yes. Yeah. Those are just a few comments.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I'm always thinking about that relationship between structure and agency, right? Like that's just that interconnection and relationship that is always going to be center to kind of an inquiry, right? What is the relationship? How is it evolving? What is it in this context? Um,
Sorry, I should say the good news is that we did get to run our project, and they actually even released all the film to us recently, so we're pretty excited about that. Yeah.
awesome. Sounds cool.
Well, and I'm curious about, I mean, my sense is that there's been some progress being made related to, oh, Sharon, I saw that you took your camera off. Maybe I'll let you jump in before I jump to the next thing.
No, go for it. I'll jump in after.
Well, I was gonna say I feel like there's been some progress made related to like the agenda question and saying like we don't know, like there's kind of this like pretending that can happen too, where you have to like pretend that you know, and you can sort of like come up with some make up some fiction around that's going to be this and there's going to be these outcomes. And but from especially community engaged researchers I've talked to, it seems like there's more of an acceptance of like the community engaged research kind of methodology of like, we don't know, we can't know until we get there and we talk to people and find out what they're going through and what they need. You know, we have like the data that says like X, Y, and Z is happening and this might be what needs to happen, but there's no way we can know that that's for sure for this specific community at this specific time. And so I don't, maybe progress, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like, yes, we're all getting on the same page on this. And then, but then, you know, there's obviously setbacks. But yeah, just an observation. I don't know if folks have responses to that at all. Sharon, maybe I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, I was just gonna thank you for sharing and also just speak to something that's really sitting with me right now, which is I guess in this moment of takeover, the need for, I guess, the emergence of community engaged research as a force in a sense. Rather than as like one of those nice things that decorates a university. I don't know. There's like something of like rising to the challenge of dictatorship that you've just really I'm just sitting with it and the courage to live our truths in this moment. So thank you.
Thank you. I feel like that was such a beautiful kind of synopsis of everything I'm feeling, but also wondering about, right? Like, um, you know, in this time of austerity and cuts and like surveillance, and I've never received so many no's or so many kind of challenges to doing the work that I do. And it was bad, you know, like, and so it's like this other level right now where I'm like, you want the stories and the pictures and the PR, and you don't, I can't have people over to my house. What are you talking about? Um, like what are we doing here, right? And that thinking about it as a force because I'm also like, is research, in this like post-truth, like, I definitely am like, science is incredible. I love science. We need it. Helps us stay alive. Um, it's like that in community engaged research as a force is just like, I don't know. I really just appreciate the reframe of that. As I'm like, is research worth it?
Well, it's like in a way, and like we're modeling the kind of society we want to see or something through our work, right? Or through the way that we do our work. And if this type of modeling is coming under attack, and just seeing the vulnerability in the sector. Anyway, I'm just real. Thank you for for sharing. I saw Christopher had also taken off. If you wanted to say something, Christopher.
Um, I'd be happy to. Yeah, I'm just really appreciating the tone of this conversation, and where we land when our values are tested, especially in service to community, is something I'm really passionate about. And just to go back to this conversation around agenda, I'm thinking in relation to my work with Walk With Me, and from the early days of being with the project, I think of a cultural teaching we received, that it was often said in circle when we were doing our research and our engagements, that the circle was the agenda. And, I think that's an endeavor to really meaningfully co-create. And I'm just sitting with this challenge that was highlighted, and needing to, describe so explicitly like what you're going to do and how you're going to do it and what the outcomes will be, when the reality is we don't know what we don't know, and we don't know what we don't know until we go ask people what we don't know. And so I think of that tension, you need a very detailed plan, but when we really sit with community, like there's a humility that comes in understanding, what we're there to learn about, and we don't know that yet. And it's such a beautiful experience to hold space for people's lived experiences and their expertise in a genuine way, and come with that humility to accept that like we're here to learn, and we're here to learn with people. So just conveying some of my experiences of Walk With Me. And Sharon, I don't know if you want to use that as a launch pad, but I'm just really grateful for this conversation, and for asking us about our experiences as well in the work of Walk With Me.
Thanks. I think you've captured something, and I don't have anything to add at this moment, but just gratitude.
I think to me, the challenge of like when I think of my time in circle with Walk With Me, and I think of Kristen's awesome work that we've shared, and just how when I think of all this community work that I have experienced or witnessed or been a part of in some way, and then I think of how like the powers that be, whether within the university, whether in the town or the city or the government, they come with an agenda, and they come with outcomes that they're expecting, and it's just like go, 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 go. And like, how do we continue to work in this way when it feels very powerful, that agenda force, like that, like, and and it's as Kristen said, it's so fast, it's just constant. And if anything, I feel like this work continuously makes me want to slow down all the time. So and it's just, I think I'm more just talking my thoughts because it's bringing up what Kristen also said about fear. So it's like this fear that the more slowly we go and the more fast they go, is that like just creating this more power. And like what, yeah. And I really appreciate that example of the senates, the faculty senates, and how like they can't um take down 300 universities at once, because then it really is that with this slowness and with this thoughtfulness and this depth, the more that we can create, that creates power in itself, um to this fast moving agenda that has conclusions before we even start. um so I'm just sharing. Um, I just wanted to also thank Kristen so much and to Siri. I have the force of the Academy is calling on me, and I have an annual review in 4 minutes. So, and thank you, Tara, so much for hosting this, and continue with your beautiful talks. But I just want to thank Kristen for being our speaker today, and to walk with me, and to Sharon and Christopher and Trevor and everyone.
Thank you.
Good luck.
I have a question. Kristen, do you, in the wake of what is happening in the US and all of the erosion of freedoms, do you feel that there's like a movement consolidating amongst community engaged researchers who are trying to find like ways of mobilizing uniquely in these circumstances? Or do you like just trying to understand what you see, or to see through your eyes of the scene, or what's emerging given what you're up against and what we're all up against to some degree, but certainly in the US is so much like more visible in this moment.
Thank you, Sharon, and thank you everyone for uh, creating this space and the Walk With Me circle, and this ongoing kind of community. Just really appreciate it, and this opportunity to talk through my thoughts, which are just really, I don't even know, kind of all over the place. But again, Sharon, that question is like, it just took me a little bit like oh, because I'm right now extremely oriented to my community rather than, and for better or worse, it is a fairly like dichotomy where I live and who I am in community with aren't really my colleagues. So I would consider this space where one place that I would look to see how folks are reacting and responding, and where I would seek solidarity, right? Which is part of, I see now, like why I asked for, why I was like, can I be in conversation with y'all about this? I need to come back to Canada, but I can't leave, like we had that conversation. We're not leaving as much as I would like to. I do have a small and mighty community engaged research crew at Penn State that is growing and is galvanizing kind of momentum. And there are people in positions of power who are saying to us, keep this going. We have the resources. We're going to infuse this because we need it more than ever. And like, this is something we have to do, regardless of whether or not the university is going to make a stance, or like we have not been censured to remove diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging from our work. I am thinking before I speak for a second. I don't care. The Philly Center has, since its genesis, been explicitly about social justice. That is our entire portfolio of work and program of work. And as of 4 months ago, we are no longer allowed to be focused on social justice. I was told that is not political. It is about having a more expansive and broad scope. So here I am, just even like talking through it, of like the tensions and like contradictions of messaging versus practice. So I attended a conference in April. There was a community engaged research conference, and that was also, it was the weekend of the first hands off. So there was a nationwide protests around like hands off of our services. It was right after they had started really gutting all of everything but particularly services. And it was such a balm to be in community with community engaged researchers who are like very, we're scrappy. We do a lot with very little, right? I feel like that's a shared maybe characteristic of us, is like we can make a pie from leftover scraps. And so I do think that how we get through this, like as an organizer, I know how I get through this is through my community. And so if and where I'm able to build that within the academy, that is how I will stay. And if it's not possible, then that's why I will leave. I have no idea what I just said. I hope it makes sense.
It resonated with me. I just want to say that. I think just
Okay, great.
and also just the notion that like maybe these academic spaces are the place to stand up or have courage, and maybe they're not. I love that, like challenge to assess whether this is the place we are to be. Thank you for that.
Thank
Oh,
you.
Trevor had your screen off. I'm just like randomly looking. Sorry. Did you want to say something, Trevor?
I was just feeling grateful for the conversation. I didn't have anything specific to say and just wanted you to see my face, I guess.
It's good to see.
Yeah, this is so great. Yeah, I've been thinking about these themes a ton, and it's really wonderful to hear that other folks are right there with us. Um, I had a question about graduate students. So you did mention them earlier as kind of like the force for change in some of these institutions, and I totally agree. We work with grad students through our fellowship program and through our research shop program, and they're amazing. They're so smart. They're so committed. They're just excited to be part of this work. And and I believe like working with grad students has made me feel that community engaged research should be the center of the university, just because you see how much they are getting out of it when they can like serve community, be in relationship with community. They get out of their isolation, they find meaning, they figure out how what they're studying is connected to the world, they see job opportunities. Like there's just so many positive things that come out of that dynamic. Um, and so I was just curious about what like your experience has been with graduate students or even early career researchers who want to be part of this shift, but who feel like stuck in some of the ways we've been talking about in kind of like more traditional academic expectations. We often have to like talk our grad students down from like being freaked out about what their committee's going to say about the stuff they're doing and how to justify it, like things like that. So I'm just curious what your experience there has been.
Yeah. I mean, it's it's not funny. I've been told since since the first time I did a project as a master's student in a clinical counseling program where I didn't have to do a thesis, but I just knew I wanted to because I wanted to keep going to school. And my committee, none of them had ever done participatory action research, or none of them had ever done photo voice. And they were just like, go for it. No idea what was happening, right? They're just like supportive. And it was, I think, such a crucial moment in my like professional development and understanding like truly research is an experiment. Like we create these amazingly elaborate designs and proposals, and even an experimental design is not going to happen the way that it's described in a grant proposal, right? And so it just was really a great first opportunity. And so I try to model that with students as well. And really from the outset of like, you need to know your stuff. You need to be, thorough. You need to be systematic. You need to be rigorous. And that is not perfect, right? Like that is not about, prediction and control and perfection. And so I am regularly dismayed by my colleagues' discouragement of community engaged research for students. And at the same time, I understand it's coming from a protective place. That said, they have agency. They're adults. Have the conversation, explain, and express your concerns, and let folks make the choice that's best for them, and then provide the best mentoring you possibly can, is really my orientation. And I'm with you all. Like, I feel like this is the ideal of university, of research, multidisciplinarity, interdisciplinarity, the could be, right? Like, this is what it could be. And it's so rigorous. That's the other part, is it is so rigorous and in depth. And the reason it takes so much time is because of that, right? Like, I don't think that our positivist friends maybe fully really grasp that. So I also feel like that's a little bit of my duty too, is to do some of that translation sometimes when there's an open ear. Like, I don't need to bang my head against a wall. I also see myself in the same way, as a youth worker, that's like how I orient to other people, right? Is like, okay, so in higher ed, in a university setting, our graduate students are vulnerable. If I'm doing a power analysis, I am going to be explicit about the way in which power it works here. And so I'm going to bring that into the conversation. I'm going to talk about it. And I'm going to, really make sure that that is a part of the decision making. Because I think it doesn't do anyone service to pretend like the academy is what it was 20 years ago, even, right? Like, so when I mean, it's interesting. I am always going to default to an advisor too. Like, if I'm not the lead on a dissertation committee, then I'm going to defer and agree with and support that person, unless there's an ethical problem, right? These are such wild relationships too. Like, if I step back and think about how much power a PhD advisor has over a student, and like the fragility of that and the vulnerability of that, it kind of blows my mind. My earbuds are dead. Can you hear me? Okay. So that all said, I feel like part of it is also like the conversations I can have with other committee members around, like, validating or strengthening the argument. I will always argue to a default. Unfortunately, I'm better at choosing my battles, but if there's a student who wants something, I will do what I can to advocate and challenge for that. In terms of like a story, I have a student here who was new to me this spring, and she's an international student from Turkey. And our first meeting was in March, maybe. And this was when, I think that there had been the illegal, students had been, Mahmed had been like kidnapped. We had multiple kidnappings of international students happening. And I said, you know, one of the first things I said to her was like, how are you doing? What do you need? And are you safe? Really? And I was taken aback by her response to that, because she followed up with me after our meeting and told me that no one had, like, that it was like shocked. She was so shocked because people aren't asking her those questions. And she's a third year. She's been in our community for 3 years. She has an advisor. She has, you know, I was like, what do you mean? How are people not reaching out to you immediately about your safety? Like, do you have a crisis plan? Like, what's the crisis plan? Because Penn State is allowing ICE on campus. So where is our network here? You know, and and the grad students were organizing that. So that is the part that both dismays me. And then also, of course, the graduate students have a, you know, their ICE watch and are like leading in that area. It's always a both and these days.
Mhm. Thank you for that. I have a follow-up question, but I wanted to invite the group, if there's any questions or comments folks would like to make, please contribute to the chat or just raise your hand or jump in. And then Kristen, I won't ask you right now, but if there's a question you'd like to ask to the group, I'll open up some space for that in a minute. But just to follow up on what you said, I've been thinking about this question a lot, and it's not a comfortable tension to sit in, but this idea that like community engaged research often, like especially if we're in like long-term relationships with community, and you've alluded to this a few times, like requires things of us that aren't in the job description, you know, and requires a type of engagement and a level of engagement, emotional investment, and things like that that can be difficult, and it's not, and confusing around what are the boundaries of something like of these types of relationships, right? Like, and I think it, on one hand, it's a personal decision, you know, about like this is where my boundary is, and so I think you can folks can like navigate that on a case by case basis based on what their own personal boundaries and level of comfort with that are. But I think at a collective level, I'm wondering like what is are the boundaries sort of shifting? I mean, I think solidarity gets at this, but it's like, are we required to do more in this, like orientate ourselves to the work in a different way that like um requires us to be different, you know, like to come to it differently and to have different expectations around the work. And yeah, I'm curious what your thoughts are on that, because I've had colleagues, you know, kind of like push back a bit and say, like, I have a family, I can only give so much, you know, to my job. And this is my job, but it's also my community. And I want to give more and I'm trying, but I think that we run the risk of like a deep burnout if we're trying to both do the work that is difficult and then also trying to be there as in relationship, and then also have all of these other commitments, family, personal, professional, and everything. So I think that can become very overwhelming quickly. So I'm just wondering how you navigate that.
Mm. Yeah. Such a rich inquiry, and no right. There's no right answer or one way. I just know what what it is for me. And for me, as part of my worldview is that the individual and the social are dialectically related. So by looking at and investing in change at the individual, local, and social level, that is deeply, I mean, transformational work is really hard and it requires your full self. So that's what transformation versus transaction means to me is like, I'm committed to doing the deeply personal work, which what we have started calling within my research collective soul work. The evolution of this was we started from the ground up, right? We were education, organizing, and research from the ground up. Then the next phase was root work. And now we're talking about soul, like shadow work and soul work. And so this is really, again, about your kind of philosophical commitments and your values and ethics. And so for me, this is how change happens. It change at the individual, at the group or social, and then at the institutional. In terms of boundaries, I think I have a pretty being like social work and then clinician, boundaries are a huge part of that training and unlearning. And this goes for educators too, right? Like any sort of institutionalized relationship. And like, what are they serving? I have great boundaries. Like I'm like, I can say no, no problem. And I also say yes a lot, maybe too much. I think for me, this also can vary toward like an ethical, like positionality and power. Like, what is my responsibility? And what is my ethical kind of commitment here? And I think it is always at least double the work. Like, and do I think that's good? No. Do I think it's healthy? No. Do I think it's true? At least double traditional research. And part of that, like on top of the double, is the amount of institutional barriers and challenges you have to negotiate to even be able to begin the double level of work. Right? So it's like burnout to me isn't caused because I'm delivering a meal or because I'm like on, the fly facilitating a meeting because somebody's kiddo was sick, right? It's because of the institution that burns me out. My community asking for support doesn't burn me out. My ability to ask my community for support and to say no, my ability to say no is also respected. It's what it means for me to be in reciprocity, to be in true reciprocity is to be able to ask for help, to say no, to say, I feel like I need to quit my job. How am I going to be able to pay for housing in this 6 months, and having people show up for me, right? Like that to me is like, is that a boundary crossing? To me, that's what it means to be an authentic relationship with people that I'm committed to producing, not co-creation and co-producing knowledge in order to change the world and to change our schools or to change, our health department. And I think that for me, my ability, maybe capacity to be like authentic and genuine is actually directly it's a variable in my research, right? Is like, my research is as good as I am able to show up. But I mean, but honestly, right? Like, I was so burned out, I quit 6 months after I got tenure, which is when you're supposed to be like, oh, everything's great. I can, like, I don't have to do anything anymore. That's a lie. But, and then I also, came to this position because I thought it would be, I knew it would pose a different set of challenges and constraints. And I thought maybe the possibilities and opportunities would be different and maybe greater than the constraints and limitations. I think I'm coming to the fruition of that exploration at this point, and I'm not sure where that will land. If I can't pay people, right? Like, if I can't pay people for their labor, for their expertise, for their brilliance, what am I even doing? Like, what is the university doing? How is that ethical in any way? Again, sorry, and I'm just totally spitballing exactly where I am right now.
No, thank you. It's very, yeah, great to hear your perspective. And I think it definitely resonated with me. And I feel like it probably resonated with others. And on the pay people piece, yeah, like 100% agree. It's if you're getting paid, how can you ask people to work with you who aren't getting paid? Like it, yeah. We have a question in the chat from Keisha Maloney. She says, thanks for this discussion. I work with youth and university students and see a great deal of fatalism among young people over their future. Not to mention the uncertainty and violence international students are experiencing. As you said earlier, Kristen, education and democracy are deeply connected depending on how education is wielded. I also think community engaged learning can be positioned as a crucial tool for helping students build bridges between the classroom and the community in the face of crises. I'm wondering if you have any other reflections on pedagogical approaches to support students in this moment and or the relationship between community engaged research and community engaged learning.
Oof, just a thank you. And appreciate even like that, the fatalism, right? I can't, it breaks my heart. So I created a minor, and it's a youth development and social justice minor based that is like reflective of your question. And my whole kind of the curriculum and pedagogy was really rooted in healing justice, using participatory action research as like a social justice youth development model. And it was designed to really, bring about some consciousness raising and through rigorous community engaged coursework. And COVID, like it happened for 2 years, and the third year we were in a school and COVID happened and it shut it down and we went online, and it was that kind of translation back to a more formal, although virtual classroom, right? Of like, okay, what does our 3 weeks in a school help us understand this theory and whatnot better? I think for me, what I really struggled with, because that was also undergrads, which is a whole nother bag. I'm not sure if you're thinking undergrads or grad students. But the amount of labor and capacity that it takes a community partner, organization, school, anyone outside, the amount of capacity that it takes for them to host university students of any kind is so huge. Unless there's like a really, really kind of established internship program that is just like, they feed them in, put them through, and it just, there's difference, right? There's a difference to like, okay, this is going to be like a project-based placement for a semester. So as soon as they get like oriented and started, the semester's over and they're gone. And so for me, that was part of my ethic, was like, how do I not do that? How do I not make this extractive, and how do I make it more investment? So that's just one question, one kind of thing I would pose. And then also, like, what are the resources the university can kind of leverage to support those organizations and groups that are hosting for free university learning? Because I'm really struggling with like unpaid internships. Students deserve to get paid. The ballooning of student debt for these for degrees is part of this crisis. Like all of these things, like I can still be critical of a system that I deeply love, right? And that is also the tension of our current moment, is like, how do I still hold my critiques without undermining? So that's, I don't know where I'm going, except that it's hard, and I think it's also really powerful and can be done. But it's really, really resource heavy. And if you're carrying a full load, you shouldn't be. If you're doing community engaged classes, I think that should be a reduced teaching load.
And be rewarded in tenure and promotion review. To boot. Okay, we've got 1 minute left before time. And so I'll just end with this question of, if you could offer one question to us, to the folks in this room, to sit with, to take to their own research and communities, what would it be?
Luckily, I saw that question before we started, so I got to actually think about it, because it's a tough one. I so appreciate it, and I want to drop this person in the chat, Margot Okazawa Ray, and she was part of the Combahee River Collective. She's one of the authors of that, and she is a transnational feminist scholar and organizer. And she's just a brilliant thinker. And so I'm borrowing from her on this question, and from my work around like the soul work and root work of individual transformation too. And so it's a few questions, but they're all part of the same one. And so she asked at this beginning of this talk that I went to, what if the biggest, most significant impact on the world I could make is by developing and growing myself? And like, to that end, I would say, and she would say, like, really kind of orienting to an inquiry and like a seeking of deep understanding, and that relationship between the self and the other and the individual and the collective, and asking these questions of like, what don't I understand? What is pinging me? What am I not even knowing that I'm not understanding? What can't I wrap my head around? What don't I know? What am I missing, and what's begging my attention? And this is part of my reminder to myself when I listen to the news and I'm just like, I don't understand what is wrong with these people. It from every level, right? Is like, what don't I understand? What can I wrap my head around? And that's part of doing the work of building the world we want to exist.
Thank you for that. Love that as an employee. Okay, thank you so much, Kristen. This went by quickly. I really enjoyed it. I really liked the informalness of what ended up emerging, and I love that other voices came into the space. And I hope we can continue to cross paths and share our work with each other. We want to continue these discussions. We'll probably take them up again in the fall. So we'll definitely keep you in the loop for the next one.
Please do. Thank you. And thanks, everybody. It's good to see your faces and to hear your voices and the chat. Really, really appreciate y'all and just knowing that you're so close. You're so close up there. Gonna have to touch down and regroup soon. Thank you all so much.